Photoshop is the 10,000-pound gorilla in any discussion of image editing. It is the granddaddy of all image editors, the standard by which others are held, the market leader, the big kahuna. It's also a very good piece of software. Whether you need to use it depends on the types of edits you want to make. If you do decide it's something you need, you'll find that it integrates very easily with your Lightroom-based workflow. As I mentioned in the last chapter, Photoshop differs from Lightroom in that it is a more traditional application. You open an image in Photoshop, you edit it, you save it, you close it, you move on to the next image. Photoshop was created in the late 1980s, and at that time computers didn't have the processing power to run a non-destructive system like Lightroom. Handling a single image with any kind of speed was all a computer could manage, and Photoshop, thanks to some very clever tricks, was amongst the speediest. Nowadays, computers have tremendous amounts of memory and storage and processing power at their disposal. The old one image at a time architecture just isn't necessary anymore, and that's why Adobe came up with Lightroom. It is a truly modern approach that isn't hamstrung by the single document architecture of 25 years ago. The thing is, in those 25 years, Adobe added more and more features to Photoshop, making it better and better. And Photoshop's feature set includes much more than just photo editing tools. Photoshop is used by pre-press professionals to ensure good color and on big, large printing presses. It's used by graphic designers and video professionals and feature film special effects artists and scientists and web designers and many others. And it includes tools aimed specifically at each of those disciplines. Because of all of that, there's no way that Lightroom could ever replace Photoshop, and it shouldn't. Lightroom provides a refined feature set aimed specifically at photographers. So why might you need to use Photoshop as a photographer? One of the biggest differences between Photoshop and Lightroom is that Photoshop is not a non-destructive system like Lightroom. It has some tools that can be used in a non-destructive way, but Photoshop is actually capable of modifying original image files. With Photoshop, you can go in and manipulate an image on a pixel-by-pixel basis, something Lightroom cannot do. The reason that Lightroom can't do this is that most of the time, you don't need to. Most images need cropping, contrast, and color correction, and Lightroom excels at these things. But when you need to remove a tree from an image, or duplicate people in a crowd to make the crowd look bigger, or repair damage to an old scanned photo, when you need to improve the skin tone of a model, or change the spatial relationships of objects in an image, any of those types of edits, and many more, if you need to do those, you need Photoshop. If you need to work with an industrial print process of some kind, newspapers, magazines, book printing, then you need Photoshop to properly prepare the data in your image. If you need to make extremely refined, localized edits to contrast and color, or correct wildly inaccurate color, then you need Photoshop. I could go on, and I would still only touch a fraction of Photoshop's feature set, and that's before I got to the features aimed at those other industries that I mentioned. For the fine art work that I do, every image goes through Photoshop. I need Photoshop's superior localized editing tools, and I need the control it gives me when I'm printing to my inkjet printer. You may not need to do those types of edits, so you might not need Photoshop. And if it turns out you don't need it, that doesn't mean you're a wimpy photographer. Different types of images and different aesthetics have different post-production needs. As I said, for $10 a month, you can get Photoshop with Lightroom, so you might already have Photoshop. In the rest of this chapter, we're going to look a little closer at it so you can decide if it's something you need to spend time learning more about.